then you would have cut it out of the podcast.
Yeah, you're right.
I hope so. Now that there's like people listening and I'm just here.
I know. I feel like we've probably crossed 800 downloads by now.
Dude.
I know. Pretty cool.
That's crazy. It's weird to think that like people want to like listen.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like whenever somebody comments like, "Hey, I just listened to it," I want to be like, "Oh my god, thank you."
What even is that?
Yeah, I don't know, cuz like I just, like the whole idea, I mean, besides providing a space where there's like a women centered like podcast on this, it is also just like I have so many thoughts that I just figured this would be a better form to get them out in, a longer form content to get them out, because there's only so much you can do in a TikTok or on Twitter or whatever. I mean, there are blogs, but I'm not gonna do both.
This is a tangent.
Great.
That, you leave in, leave out. I don't know. Who cares? You care, though, because you're my BFF.
Right.
In Jefferson City, I felt more, like, isolated culturally, obviously, than I do here in Kansas City, because people are different.
Yeah.
In a good way. In a good way. And I listened to podcasts that were exclusively advertised as just two black people talking to each other about bullshit, like literally anything.
Yeah.
And it comforted me so much just to hear them rant and speak about things and share their ideas, because I didn't have that in my everyday life.
Not any black spaces where you were.
Yeah. I mean, they were literally like, they weren't talking about politics. They weren't talking about ethics or morals. It was like literally just like, did you watch 90 Day Fiance? And this is what happened. And
just like what they've been up to and their thoughts. And
yeah. So I think you're on the money when you want to like create a female fandom space that is like this, because it's just different when you hear someone who you have similarities with talking about things. It just is it's a little comfort.
Yeah, I think that particularly in Tolkien, it's been dominated by white men for, like from scholars to the other dudes that have podcasts to, just like whoever's talking about on the internet. Like it's if you're a white dude doing it, you're kind of a dime a dozen, right? Like, I mean, it's easy to find something that if you're also a white dude that, probably resonates with you, because there's so many of them out there. But, there's really only a handful, I would say, of women. I mean, there are more now, but, like, particularly when I was looking at, like, should I do a podcast about this? There's just really only, like, a handful of it, and I really wanted to, I don't know, I just think we have so much fun when you and I talk. So I was like, can I bottle that somehow and make it about this thing? And, I think us having like a variety of guests has been really cool. I think that has contributed a lot to it. I feel like every time somebody comes on there, I'm like, oh wow, like that's a great idea that I hadn't thought of before. I feel like Edith and Sarah and Emily, like particularly in that vein, like afterwards I would be like, oh yeah, I really like that idea, and like it would like resurface in other episodes. So I mean, I hope that this podcast is doing that for somebody. I mean, I know that there's like, I mean, I know there are people listening to it. I don't necessarily know, like, and it's funny because like I do have we're free hosted because hashtag like poor, but there's like, it's a free thing that we're putting out there, so like how much I put in some money obviously, but the analytics are kind of like all over the place, but I do think I have a feeling that it is a lot of like women or listeners as well, which makes me happy. But not to say like, especially like my guy friends that listen to this, I love you and thank you for listening to this. You're cool. You get it.
most people get it. It's just
Yeah.
the people who don't get it are really loud about not getting it.
Yes. Like,
So
like, where I fully believe that they all need therapy.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, they're a little too mad. A little too angry. And I do understand, like, anger gets a lot of, like, clicks and stuff, but it's not my vibe. It's not the energy that I want to partake in.
No, you do not.
I don't know how they have. I feel like that being angry about something so silly as like this would take much more energy than it is worth. And I'm astonished every time I see like a white or a angry white dude on the internet that like has all this energy. I'm like, do you not have a job? Like, I get so, like, you know what I mean? Like, I have enough brain space for that, and then a little bit left over for this, and otherwise I'm a slug.
Yeah.
That's
I was going to say something similar, but I didn't know how to quite put it eloquently, because there's got to be a special, like, skill or thing that you can tap into that people need to monetize, because like if people have all of this extra time to be mad about these things, I need to know how to have extra time. I honestly do, because I don't have enough of it.
Yeah.
So how
it's amazing.
how
like,
are they doing
do they
it?
sleep? I don't know. Like,
I
are
don't
they
have that kind of energy to be
androids?
putting on strangers like that.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's wild. Truly. So, I guess I'll actually... I guess we should talk about our chapters today. Hi, if you hadn't figured it out already, this is another episode of Tolkien with Friends, and we've been Tolkien with Friending.
We have been friending.
Yes, we've been talking.
A little bit of Tolkiening.
Friending, yeah. So today we've got another one of those situations where we do finish a couple of chapters, but we also start a couple of other chapters. So I ended up reading 4 chapters for today, but we don't finish all of them. We pretty much finished the Stairs of Cirith Ungol and the Muster of Rohan, and we see part of the passing of the Grey Company, which is pretty changed, but there's towards the end it's more similar, and the Siege of Gondor. And because all that story is crammed into this section, we cover almost an hour of the extended edition of Return of the King. So it's from about 54 minutes and 42 seconds in to an hour and 50 minutes and 47 seconds. So that was pretty much an hour, but, almost. So let's start with Cirith Ungol, because that's where the movie starts. It's like Gandalf explaining the Witch King and the Morgul Vale, like the area where Minas Morgul is, as Frodo, Sam, and Gollum enter into it. So, of course, in the book, we get a lot more description about the creepy vibes of this place. Like it describes these beautiful but horrible flowers that grow there. It talks about how the river is steaming, but the steam is actually cold. And I'm like, creepy. Yeah, it's like very spooky, strange place, and there's also this this constant feeling of like watchfulness coming from Minas Morgul. But really, besides Frodo almost walking into the arms of the enemy at this point, the big conflict here is the scene that I feel like we've been talking about for months. That whole Sam and Gollum situation. So in the movie, Gollum takes the limbus bread while Sam is sleeping and sprinkles crumbs on him, throws the rest of it downstairs. This leads to a confrontation between Sam and Gollum and ends with Frodo telling Sam to go home. And, if I'm watching the movie, like, sincerely, you know what I mean? Like, fully, like, when I watch it for this, I'm, like, taking notes and pausing it constantly. But when I'm just watching it full on, breaks my heart or makes me angry. There's no like in between. I'm either just pissed or really sad, because Sean Astin's crying affects me.
You love him so deeply.
I do. He's precious. And he's such a dad. I love it. And that scene is just the worst, and thankfully it doesn't happen in the books. But what does happen, like basically at the same moment, is a different moment with Gollum. And after, I cut to Sam and Frodo are sleeping, and Gollum comes back. Like he left while they were sleeping, and he comes back after what I can only assume is him seeing Shelob, being like, "I've got some fresh meat coming your way," to find Frodo and Sam sleeping. And instead of framing Sam for eating all the food, this is arguably a moment where Gollum could have been saved from like the pull of the ring. So in the book, I'm just going to read you what it says because I think I don't know how else to tell it to you. I don't want to paraphrase it. I just like it. It says, Gollum looked at them. A strange expression passed over his lean, hungry face. The gleam faded from his eyes, and they went dim and gray, old and tired. And I will say that, like, if you haven't read the books, constantly when Gollum is kind of being sneaky or up to something, it references a green gleam in his eye. So at this moment, the gleam fades from his eyes. They go dim and gray, old and tired. A spasm of pain seemed to twist him, and he turned away, peering back up towards the pass, shaking his head as if engaged in some interior debate. Then he came back, and slowly putting out a trembling hand, very cautiously he touched Frodo's knee, but almost the touch was a caress. For a fleeting moment, could one of the sleepers have seen him, they would have thought that they beheld an old weary hobbit, shrunken by the years that had carried him far beyond his time, beyond his friends and kin, and the fields and streams of youth, an old, starved, pitiable thing. So that, Frodo and Sam are somehow finding way to sleep on this
scary place.
So they're like going up. They've gone up the straight stairs, and before they go to like the second part of the stairs, they found a little nook to kind of sleep in. Gollum walks up to them, and you see this like moment for him where he's literally reaching out, but at that moment Frodo cries out in his sleep, waking Sam, and then you have the whole, what were you doing? And then, Gollum kind of teases him for or like is sarcastic about it, and is like sneaking, because that's what Sam was always referring to him as doing. But this moment is like so pivotal for Gollum, and I believe that Tolkien wrote in one of his letters that if Sam hadn't been so suspicious of Gollum would have been redeemed, or at least would have helped them rather than betraying them in Shelob's lair, which we know is coming next. And I was listening to some of my friends discussing this very thing on Cali Cosplay and New Betta's podcast, Voices of Arda. But their take was that, like, Gollum, basically that, like, the way that the rules of the world are, with, like, Eru Ilúvatar as God, and everything, like, being a part of God's plan, that basically Gollum had to betray them in order for the ring to be destroyed. But in Tolkien's letter, he talks about how Gollum would have helped them, and ultimately it would have led to the same thing of, and I think it's because, we know that Frodo is kind of destined to fail, right? Like, he's carried this ring for, a while now, but not as long as Gollum, and it's affected him. Like, Frodo probably would have still failed, but I think that in the letter, Tolkien had said that, like, Gollum would have, in order to, like, satisfy the Gollum side and, like, the Smeagol side, he would have taken the ring and, like, sacrificed himself on purpose. But even if that weren't true, I think that their conference, even if Gollum had helped them get through Shelob's lair and helped them sneak across the plains of Gorgoroth and gotten to Mount Doom, I think that it's very clear to me, at least, that both of them probably would have been overcome by the power of the ring and had their struggle. And it's the same thing. Gollum falls in, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that this moment right here on the stairs isn't so much about Gollum's choices, but Sam's. You know, it's not that Gollum chose to be wicked. It's that Sam didn't. He never learned to extend kindness to Gollum, and therefore Gollum doesn't change. You know, like he's immediately suspicious of Gollum in that moment. He like accuses. He's like, "What the heck are you doing?" You know, thinking that he's the reason that Frodo cried out, even though Frodo was probably just having like a bad dream.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that to me, the lack of this scene in the movie, you know, I mean, we've talked about this before, but like, I feel like the way the movie is, it's like Gollum is only nice for like 5 seconds. You know, like he. And I'm not saying that Gollum is actually that nice in the book, but I think that he has more moments like when Sam is cooking, Gollum gets him the water and he gets him Sam asked him for the rabbits or like anything that he could find, and Gollum goes and gets it, even though his promise is to Frodo. You know what I mean? Like there's other things that Gollum does where it's like he's not a goner, and I think too many movie fans and even others, I think that they write Gollum off, but I think that you know Gandalf is kind of like the voice of the conscious, like the heart of this a lot of the time, like explained, and he has explained from every from our Frodo to like the highest elves that Gollum is not beyond saving. He reiterated that multiple times, and I don't think that he's requiring everyone to be as nice to Gollum as possible because there is like actual hope for him, not necessarily because he might do something for them. Like there's no way that Gandalf would have known that Gollum would have ended up helping Frodo in any way. There's no way that. I don't even think it was about like him ultimately becoming a force for good exactly, but I think that Gandalf was aware that Gollum there was hope for him, and that Gollum would be able to like be his own person again, like to be free of Sauron, if only for a little while, because he is ancient at this point. Like he's like 500-600 years old or something.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I really feel strongly about that. Like this moment was like a big deal. I think that I've read that Tolkien like wept, like cried while writing this because it was so sad but it makes sense for Sam's character, like that Sam, in his love for Frodo, he can't let go of his suspicions of Gollum. I totally understand why he doesn't. But that behavior kind of seals the deal for Gollum. So yeah, I do understand like the subtleties of a scene like this, or like being able to show Gollum. However, I do think that the effects people could have had fun with it, as far as like showing him looking more hobbitish than like this shriveled creature. I think I'm gonna say that it's possible. You know what I mean? And it definitely would have taken the same amount of time as whatever the heck they did, with the whole Frodo telling Sam to go home, which like,
yeah, who needed that?
It's terrible. And it's like, and I think that this scene is much more to the spirit of Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, and like the hope, and the hope that there is victory at the end. You know what I mean? Like not because like there is a scene on the stairs in the stairs chapter where Frodo is kind of overcome with like when the moment when, because he is there when the Minas Morgul is basically unleashed, and Frodo was like, oh my gosh, I'm too late. Will Faramir have even, like, first he starts with, like, Faramir, will Faramir have even crossed the river yet? They don't have enough people to fight all of these, you know, like, my friends, like, there's, like, I don't even know if any of them will, like, even if I do finish this task, will any of my friends know that I did it, you know? And then he, like, kind of comes to himself and he's like, you know, whether anybody knows that I did it is beside the point. Like, that's not the point. The point is to try to save whoever we can, you know, not just the people that I personally know and love, you know. And I think the same is true for Gollum. Like, of course you're not supposed to, like, love Gollum, but I think that rooting for him in some way is part of the point, you know. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Yeah, you're making sense.
Okay.
I've never heard of anyone saying that they would be rooting for Gollum.
I think that in having, because in the movies, like, it's never, I mean, I think they try in the scene in the Mines of Moria with Gandalf, you know, saying, like, Frodo was meant to find the ring, you know, and that, like, it was pity that stayed built. Like, they only did it once, though. And I think in the book, they call back to that multiple times. They also are very clear with, like, the way that Frodo treats Gollum. He'll be firm, but he is always kind, you know? And I think that it's like, at that point, like, you know, Gollum could have clearly been he already was a huge ally in the fact that he gets them so far, because otherwise, how would they have found that road? But we know that Gollum is kind of trying to use it as a way to get the ring back. But I think that in the book, there was a chance for him to kind of, you know, be free from that, be free from the ring's influence for a little while, even as we're on, like, the borders of Mordor. And I think that would have made, you know, their journey probably even better. But I also think just for, like, we're supposed to want Gollum, we're supposed to be nice to Gollum just because it's a great thing to do. You know what I mean? Like, because there is hope for Gollum, even if it's just a sliver of it. And I think that Sam didn't fully understand that the way that Frodo did, because we know that Gandalf had that huge long conversation with him about Gollum, like Gandalf to Frodo, but I don't think that was ever really communicated to Sam. So, you know, Gollum stays treacherous when he didn't necessarily need to be. And it kind of reminds me of Boromir, like, different but same vibe as far as, like, he never really let go of the idea that the ring could be used to help Gondor. And I think it's partially because nobody really, like, fully explained to him the way it was explained to Frodo. Like, no, seriously, you do not have the ability to wield this thing. There's nothing that you could do with it that would turn to good. Like, it would start out probably okay, but it would it's literally Sauron's spirit. You cannot use this thing the way that you think you can. And so I feel like both of them probably could have benefited from a little sit down talk in a way. But, you know, I get also why it doesn't happen. They're, like, moving and grooving, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I just think that I think people are really quick to just, like with Sam, like, to dislike Gollum, but I think that it is important to understand, like, if he's not good, but he is, you know, he's still a person. He's still, like, valuable and has value in his humanity, whatever, however much of that is left, you know? That's really my main thoughts about Cirith Ungol chapter.
Lots of thoughts.
Yeah. I feel like we've been building to this moment for a long time.
Cal's also passionate about it.
Yeah, I get that.
Be nice to Sam.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
Yeah. Because it, I think that, just thinking about Gollum, I'm sure that I think that it is true that, like, he hates himself a little bit. You know what I mean? And so that, like, and he has been, he's lasted a remarkably long time, but he has probably had too much time to himself, and I think that, when you're sad and alone, you probably have a lot more negative thoughts than you would if you were around people. It's probably his first time that he's been around people that have been nice to him for a really long time. And, we know that Gollum, in the book, Gollum has really only had that conversation once to himself, like several weeks, days. I don't even know about time in the timeline right now, but, with the Dead Marshes. And, there was the whole kerfuffle with Faramir. But I think that it's this moment almost like Gollum is like, it's like he's realized that what he's doing with his whole plan with Shelob was kind of messed up, and he's like you see him wrestling with himself, like a twinge of pain that makes him look away. And it's almost like, because there is clearly, like we'll see when we get to Shelob's lair, there probably is a way that they could have avoided her, and Gollum probably knows that. I don't know, it's almost like he's had some time to himself, and he's been thinking about all the ways that maybe he does realize how much Frodo has helped him, like staying away, or like not being killed by Faramir's men, and the kindness that Frodo's extended to him. So he reaches out to him, and then that wakes Sam up, and Sam, in his pure little heart, but he always assumes the worst of Gollum. And so it just makes me think of, like, when you assume the worst of, like, a kid, they're gonna probably act out, you know what I mean? Like, they're gonna...
That's true. That's true.
Like, when you assume the worst of somebody, they're gonna rise to your expectations in a lot of ways. And I think that's what happens here with Gollum. Yeah. Because there's a line... Oh, I wrote it down. Or I thought I did. Or I wrote it on the page number. Where, so Frodo realizes that they have had, like, their little fight or whatever. Like, they're being sassy to each other about the sneaking thing.
Mm-hmm.
Gollum refers to himself as a sneak after that interaction to Frodo. Because, like, at first it's like Sam feels bad after being like, where have you been to? Sneaking off and sneaking back, you old villain. And then Gollum is like, sneaking? Hobbits always so polite. Yes, oh nice hobbits. Smeagol brings them up secret ways that nobody else could find. Tired he is, thirsty he is, yes, thirsty. And he guides them, and he searches for paths, and they say, sneak, sneak. Very nice, friends. Oh yes, my precious, very nice. And then Sam feels bad, and he's like, I'm sorry, but you startled me, and I shouldn't have been sleeping, and it made me a bit sharp. Mr. Frodo, he's that tired. I asked him to have a wink, and well, that's how it is. Sorry, but where have you been to? Sneaking, said Gollum, and the green glint did not leave his eyes. And then later, when Frodo wakes up, he's like, hey, he's like, hello, Smeagol. Found any food? Have you had any rest? Like, he's checking on his welfare, like a good friend. And he's like, no food. Yeah.
I wouldn't say friend.
Well, Frodo says that.
Oh, Frodo says that.
Yeah. Frodo's like, have you had any food? Have you had any rest? He's like checking on him. He's like being legit, Mm-hmm. And then Gollum says, no food, no rest, nothing for Smeagol. He's a sneak. Sam clicked his tongue but restrained himself. So Frodo had missed all of that conversation. And Frodo says, "Don't take names to yourself, Smeagol. It's unwise, whether they are true or false." And Gollum goes, "Smeagol has to take what's given him. He was given the name by kind Master Samwise, the hobbit that knows so much." I'm like, does this not feel like two kids that are, like, blaming each other right now? Like, they're fighting and
They're
like,
sassing each other.
yeah. And then Frodo looked at Sam. "Yes, sir," he said. "I did use the word, waking up out of my sleep sudden and all and finding him at hand. I said I was sorry, but I soon shan't be." I'm like, oh my god. And then Frodo's just like, "Come, let it pass then. But now we seem to have come to the point, you and I, Smeagol, tell me, can we find the rest of the way ourselves?" And basically Frodo tries to release Smeagol from his promise and to be like, you can go free to do whatever you want, like, go find food and rest, like, if we can find the way ourselves, like, we'll just go. But Gollum's like, no, not yet. You can't find the way themselves, because obviously he wants to lead them into a trap for sure now.
Sure.
But I don't know, it just makes you think if Sam, I think that had Sam treated Gollum nicely at least in that moment, and I understand being startled or whatever, but he did call him a villain. You know what I mean? Like, from Gollum's perspective, it wasn't great. It wasn't great. So, that's what probably should have happened on the stairs. I think it's interesting to think about, and I think that Gollum is not. I mean, I feel like it's very black and white in the movies, but I don't think of it that way in the books at all.
Very black and white in the movies.
Yeah. And, if I can say so, I think Gollum deserves better. A little bit.
There you go.
So yeah, that's just like something that I wish more fans understood about Gollum, I think. But instead, we have him acting like the worst and with no nuance. So that's great.
People can only handle so much dimension.
It's hard.
The masses.
It's fine. That's why we're talking about it. So, but can we talk about a scene that I really do love that comes pretty much after this? Right after this is the lighting of the beacons. Now, in the books, this is like nothing. It's not a scene. It's like Pippin being like, it's when they're entering Gondor, and Pippin is like, "Are there dragons in this land? There's fire like on the mountaintops."
Aww.
And Gandalf is like, "No, the beacons have been lit. Let's go faster." And but in the movies, and in the book, it's because Denethor knows about the black ships to the south, the Corsairs of Umbar, that will be attacking them in like southern Gondor. So he sends word to Rohan because of that, not necessarily because of all the other stuff that's coming, which makes sense. Like, how would he know?
Mm-hmm.
How would they know to call for that? But I think having Pippin be the catalyst for the lighting of the beacons, is quite nice in the movie. And also, I think the scene with like the music, the mountains, like all the little lighting of the beacons, I think it's really beautiful. I think it's a great scene to watch. And who doesn't love Vigo with the "Gondor calls for aid," and Bernard Hill and "Rohan will answer." I mean, it's great. It's a great moment in the movie. And it's one of those changes where I'm like, yeah, cinematically,
it works.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And it's really fun to watch. And the music, I think, also knocks it out of the park. So, very fun. I like that change. And, with the chapters, the passing of the Great Company and the Muster of Rohan, they kind of combine these. And I think it's because, they cut out so earlier we had seen the Rangers and Elrond's sons Elladan and Elrohir show up to meet Aragorn when they were leaving Isengard, because they were looking for him. But that they cut that out, which I get. Like, too many characters already. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would also be hard to explain that yes, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli are going to the same place as the rest of the Rohirrim, but they want to get there like a day earlier. So they all want to get to Dunharrow because that is where the Rohirrim are kind of all like gathering together before they ride off to war, so he can get a good head count, all that. And that is also the path to get to the Paths of the Dead, which is where Aragorn has to go in order to get our ghostly army later. And so they all have to go there anyway. I think movie-wise, it probably makes sense to just keep them all together because movie pacing wise, they're together already anyway. So just like boom, they're there. Like you see them get it. Rohan will answer. They go to Dunharrow to gather people within a couple days, and then they'll ride on the third day. They also tie Elrond bringing Aragorn's sword into this scene. It's not in the book, but because obviously Aragorn has had his sword this whole time, like he reforged it, right? So we had talked about previously Arwen being the one to ask Elrond to reforge Narsil, and then it becomes Andoril, and they have Elrond show up to give it to Aragorn. In the book, it's his sons that bring hit this like, it's like a flag. I don't know what they call it, like but it's basically like we got the symbol of the Gondorian king, like the tree with the crown and the stars and all that. I can't remember what it's called. I think they also bring him the scepter of Illuminos, which is like it's like scepter of the king. But Aragorn, that none of that is in the movie. So they make it all about sword, which sure, like, as much as I want Aragorn to have had his sword this whole time, I think that it does work to have them bring it to him. Like if they aren't going to give it to him at the outset, I think it does work to have Elrond bring the sword at this moment, because then it's like he is talking about the people who live in the mountain, and they're the ghosts, right? And and they're traitors because they had sworn to help Isildur way back in the day, and they backed out because they like secretly worshipped Sauron, but they were also afraid of Sauron, so they didn't fight for anybody. They didn't like pick a side, really. They were just like, nah, we're gonna sit this one out. And so Isildur cursed them, and basically that they cannot rest until they fulfilled their oath. So that's why they're stuck there. And everyone's afraid of it because ghosts are scary. Scary. So Elrond is like, you must seek the paths of the dead, which also makes sense. Like, his sons are cut out of it, but his sons are the ones that are like, we have a message from Elrond, from our dad, to seek the paths of the dead. And he's like, all right. And so I think that in this case, like, it works to do it like that. And you really see like Aragorn being like, yeah, they, like, he has to accept the role of the king and take the sword, in order to get them to fight. And even in the books, he, nobody wants to go through the paths of death. Nobody wants to do it. But he is like, I have to do this thing because it is my only hope of really being able to fight Sauron, to really do it right, and so they used that moment as him like finally realizing how, and I get it, like, I'm sure that war would make you more pumped up to take a lead, like someone like Aragorn, finally taking a leadership role. I get it. So he, accepts his role as, well, he starts to accept his role, I think, there, and agrees to go to the paths of the dead. In both the book and the movie, he doesn't ever really explain, like, he obviously had talked to Elrond in the movie, but he doesn't really say, like, to anybody, particularly Eowyn or Theoden, why he's going there. Everyone in the book just thinks he's Looney Tunes. Like, he's going off to die. What a weirdo.
Oh no.
Because they have several, legends about how nobody comes back from trying to seek that road. Speaking of, and so Eowyn, when she realizes that he's doing this, she confronts him about it. She's like, what the heck are you doing? That's insane. That's insane. You're being an idiot. Like, we could use you on the battlefield. And it's not, in the movies, they had kind of picked apart this scene already. Like, when she's talking to Aragorn in this chapter, some of these lines that we've already seen in the movie, like her talking about her fear to stay behind bars until use in old age, accept them, and all chance of doing great deeds is gone beyond recall or desire. We've heard her say something similar in Edoras in the movies. This same conversation is also when Eowyn talks about staying behind to find food and beds when the soldiers return, and I think we have her say that in Helm's Deep instead, because, she's like, in the movie, she's been following him around, but in the book, all the women and children of Edoras and, like, older people and stuff of Edoras had already been at Dunharrow. Like, we all went there. This is where they've been chilling while all the Helm's Deep stuff was happening. So they break up this conversation, but what I really like about how it plays out in the book is that when she's saying these things, it's never like, they always frame it in a way that she's somehow using it to throw herself at Aragorn, right? Like, I don't think anytime she talks to Aragorn, it's not her being like, love me, please, right? Like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what I really like about it in the book, because it's like a couple of pages long in my version, and she is really debating him, and she is saying, like, you're being nuts, you need to come fight with us, and Aragorn is talking about his duty, and also hers, and Aragorn, and so she's finally like, well, fine, I'm coming with you, because she's also a badass, and Aragorn won't let Eowyn go with him, because at this point, it's not until later it's in the same section in the movie, but it's towards the end of it, that Theoden gives Eowyn the job of, like, leading the people once they're all away at war, but he, because of Hama, who suggested it, which I think is interesting. I'm glad that in the movies it's actually Theoden's idea to give it to her, but she has already been given that role back at Edoras, right? And so Aragorn's like, you can't go with me, you're supposed to be leading your people while Theoden and Éomer are gone. And Eowyn is like, I should be able to spend my life as I want. Like, I am a person and I can do what I want. No. And, she obviously desires to, at this point in her life, it very much gives the song from Beauty and the Beast where Bella's like, I want adventure in the great wide somewhere. Like, it's very giving me that, where, because she just clearly desires to make a name for herself. Like, she doesn't want to just be Eowyn, Princess of Rohan, or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, she wants to be known for what she could do. And I get that urge, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, and Aragorn is like, he's like, few may do that with honor, and I get where he's coming from. Like, if everybody just did whatever they wanted, then there would be no, like, nobody would be helping each other out or whatever, but you know what I'm saying? Like, he's saying, like, you really can't just go do whatever you want. Like, I'm not doing whatever I want. He says to her, like, if I was just doing whatever I wanted, I would be in Rivendell. He puts it much more prettily, and she's like, yes. What? Yeah, because he doesn't ever say Arwen's name, which he probably should have. I'm just gonna put that out there. He probably should have been more explicit. Like,
I got a girl.
Yeah, there's a lady. We're betrothed and all that. But one of her best lines, I think, from this, like, we've heard a few of them that were supposed to be in this scene, But one of the best things that she says is, all your words are but to say, you are a woman, and your part is in the house. But when the men have died in battle in honor, you have leave to be burned in the house, for the men will need it no more. But I am of the house of Errol, and not a serving woman. I can ride and wield blade, and do not fear pain, either pain or death. And the last part, that last part is in the movie, but the context is different. We know she doesn't fear either pain or death, but just the whole, like, you're just saying that because I'm a woman, and you don't expect me to do anything without leave of a man, and it's I feel it's such a much more stronger position, like, she's not saying, like, she does say that the men follow you because they love you, but that's not the last thing that she says to him, like it kind of is in the movie. She's obviously upset, and because she thinks he's going off to do this stupid thing because he literally will not explain what he's doing. Why?
Yeah.
Communication is an important skill. Let's just talk about that. Welcome to Therapy Hour with Andy.
Media would have us think that communication doesn't matter at all.
I know. Think about all the movies and TV shows that would have no plot if they just explained what they were thinking or feeling at that moment. So many things
difficult.
Resolved. Yeah. So, I love this, and because, as we see at the end of the Muster of Rohan, and at the end of this section of the movie, despite Eowyn's duty to lead her people, which has been established in both book and movie, and Aragorn thinks is paramount to whatever Eowyn wants, she rides to war anyway. You see her grab Merry in the movie, and it's obviously Eowyn. In the book, there is this soldier that is slighter, like smaller than the other soldiers, that offers Merry a ride, basically, because the main reason that he can't go to war with that Theoden won't let him go to war is it's like,
you can't ride
your pony isn't fast enough, and none of my soldiers can carry you. But Eowyn is smaller, she doesn't weigh as much, so it equals out.
Yeah.
But Merry doesn't know that it's Eowyn. No. In the book, which obviously is easier to do because you can't, like, hear voices. But it does make me wonder, like, what is Eowyn's voice supposed to sound like? Because he does just assume that it's like a younger soldier. And he's like, thank you, sir, but he's like, I don't know your name, I don't know what to call you. And they go, do you not? Okay, well then call me Durnhelm. So she's going by Durnhelm until she takes off her helmet.
Noted.
In the book, yeah, but it's Eowyn. Spoiler alert. But I
think everyone knows it's Eowyn.
Yeah, it's.
If you're listening to this podcast, I think you know.
Spoiler alert! It makes me laugh so hard whenever people on the internet are like, you should put a spoiler alert. I'm like, this thing came out 20 years ago. I mean, not necessarily specifically to Lord of the Rings, but like other things, that I'm like, you're just young and you haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, I think I saw some things about like Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I was like, okay, if you don't know that Anakin is Darth Vader by now, you are one not living in 2022.
I know, like, that means you haven't even watched the prequels. Like,
everybody knows that.
They were just born, and they turned on Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I'm like, what is this? So we've got Eowyn. She's clearly, I don't know if she bothered to she obviously sneaking out, I don't know if she told anybody. I don't know if everyone back at Dunharrow is like, where the hell did our lady go?
Where'd that bee go?
Yeah, we're missing a princess. But had she not done so, can we do a hypothetical about, like, what would have happened at the Battle of the Pelennor Fields? Because, spoiler alert again, and as you probably recall from seeing the movies, she takes out the Witch King.
She does the murder.
Yeah, and it's like it was foreseen that, like, no living man can kill the Witch King, and Gandalf helpfully in the movies tells us that when he's explaining the Witch King to Pippin and Minas Tirith, when he's like, juxtapose. Peter Jackson kind of cuts back and forth between Gandalf and Pippin and showing the Witch King and Minas Morgul with Frodo and Sam. So thank you for that, Gandalf. So that's the word on the street, is that no living man can kill the Witch King. I don't want to take away from Eowyn's win there, but Merry does help, which we could get into more later. But let's say Eowyn doesn't go. She stays home. Like, Merry wouldn't have even gone either.
No.
Okay, so Merry's hanging out with Eowyn, wondering what the heck is happening on the battlefield. The Witch King probably lets his fell beast eat Theoden. No funeral for that guy. Nobody to bury. Sorry. And all right, so we've still got Aragorn with the ghosts, but in the movie, they're kind of like, they make it out like they're kind of the ace in the hole. You know what I mean? Like, they kill everybody at that point. Like, there's no point. Like, we don't even need the Rohirrim. There's just a huge ghost army. Yeah, but in the book, he actually lets them go after scaring away the people with the ships. So they don't really do much fighting. It's actually a much smaller scale battle, I think, than what Peter was imagining.
It's nice in Return of the King.
Yeah. So Aragorn shows up, the Rohirrim are still there, but we've still got the Witch King. I mean, I'm just thinking that the Witch King would have done so much more damage in Gondor at the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. And if he's their main man, like, if he's not taken out, like, he's not going down until probably Frodo gets the ring, or Gollum gets the ring into the fire, you know what I mean? And that doesn't happen until they're able to distract Sauron later, after the battle is over. So I'm kind of wondering, like, because there's literally no way to take out the Witch King, really, without Eowyn, as far as I'm aware, like, in this context. I just think there would be no distraction of Sauron. There would, like, he probably would have caught Frodo. Yeah.
It's a whole chain of events.
Yeah, it's just interesting to think about, because, like, I get where Aragorn's coming from as far as, like, yeah, she probably should be leading her people, but at the same time, like, there's not much to do at that moment. Like, they're just chilling in Dunharrow. It's not like at this point you can really go, it's not like they need to live their lives as normal. Most of the men are going to war. I don't know. Any thoughts on if Eowyn had been like, yeah, you're right, Aragorn, I should not have any ambitions for myself, and I should just lead or just hang out with my people during this battle.
I don't want to have thoughts about it, because I think she did the right thing.
Yeah, I think
so
she did too.
I'm happy with that choice, and there is no other choice.
It's interesting to think about Aragorn being wrong, because most of the time he's not. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think we talked about this probably early in Two Towers, where Frodo and Aragorn were both feeling like, ugh, I feel like I'm not making the right decision. Like, second guessing themselves. Like, should I have gone with Frodo? Blah, blah, and so on and so forth. But he was making the right choice, right? And I think it's, again, we've seen this before, where, like, Tolkien is epitome of follow your heart. Follow your heart, boo thing. Like, you got this. Like, if you're not sure, your heart knows, and that, I feel like that's really what Eowyn was doing. Like, same way Aragorn, like, you refuse to explain why you have to go on the paths of the dead. Like, I know why you have to go on the paths of the dead. all these other people are really confused. Not very fair, but like I get it. You have to do that, and Eowyn felt like she had to do this, and good for her.
Good for her.
Good for her for not listening. So I really wish that last debate between them had been a bit stronger. I don't even, they throw in that couple of lines that I was saying a second ago. It could have, I think, a little bit more interesting. I just don't think that every scene with Eowyn and Aragorn had to be like her throwing herself at him. It was just
no, that was totally unnecessary.
It didn't need to be like that because Eowyn doesn't even act like that. And even when Aragorn leaves, there's a line that clearly shows, like, from Theoden, where he sees that she's upset, and he says, some comfort you seem to need in your grief for this guest. It's clearly like a nod to, you don't know him. I don't really know why you're that sad.
You don't know that man.
But in the movies, you've got Theoden being like, I'm happy for you. And I'm like, they're not betrothed or anything. Nobody got down on one knee. What do you think is happening here, Theoden?
Mistakes.
Yeah. So I really like that she stands up to him in the book more. I think that would have been cool to see. That even if they did want to do like a little hint about her flirting with him earlier, but then their last confrontation is her being like, no, dude, like, that's ridiculous, I think that would have been nice to see. And so, for this last part, with Faramir, Denethor, Pippin, and Gandalf, the scenes from this section are really the first few pages of the Siege of Gondor, and while condensed, it's pretty accurate. I'm gonna say that. It's pretty accurate. Whatever vibes you're picking up from Denethor, those are also his vibes in this part of the book. And reading Denethor and then watching John Noble's performance back to back like this, it's like, it's impossible to like Denethor. I don't know. I don't know if anybody has an argument as to liking this character, but I don't think it's possible.
No, he bad.
Yeah, he's just like
Jerk.
so proud and rude and mean, and I'm like, you are gonna be mean to your only son. Like, your other son is dead, and you're gonna
just casually throw your other one away.
Yeah, it's so messed up, and I just want to be like, Faramir, I get that it's your dad, but like, he sucks. He sucks. And let's talk about self-worth a little bit. That your value does not come from your father's opinion of you. You are valuable as a person, and you are smart, and you are strong.
Tell him.
Pep talk. I'm like, you don't need your dad's approval. His opinions are poop. Or poop opinions. The one thing I will say is, like, we get more mild sass from Gandalf to Denethor, and they give not all of it, but they give a couple lines to Faramir when he's like, Boromir would have reached out his hand to take this thing, saying that Boromir would have fallen to the ring, like, you don't know what you're talking about. They give that to Faramir in the movie, but otherwise, like, the whole, you wish that our places had been exchanged, and he says, I wish that, and I'm like, I can't believe that you would say that to your,
that's truly a person who doesn't care for their child.
Not until he is dying do you act like you give a flying fuck. Like, no. Denethor, get out. But in addition to that, Gandalf, he doesn't let Faramir stand alone. He, sasses to Denethor as well, which I appreciate. And after Denethor gives his whole spiel about how he would have kept the red ring hidden deep in the vaults, and not to be used unless he absolutely needed to. Denethor ends it with, if you do not trust me to endure the test, you do not know me yet. And Gandalf is like, nonetheless, I do not trust you. Had I done so, I could have sent this thing hither to your keeping and spared myself and others much anguish. And now, hearing you speak, I trust you less, no more than Boromir. And then he's like, nay, stay your wrath, as in, like, hold your horse, like, don't be, like, grumpy. He's like, I do not trust myself in this, and I refuse this thing even as a freely given gift, you know? But I do love that he's like, no, you're right, I do not trust you.
Yes.
Right.
You read that correctly.
Yeah. And so, yeah, but, you know, John Noble does a great job of being a horrible dad as Denethor. But, you know, like, the whole Gandalf riding out to save Faramir and some of his men from the Nazgul, that happens. Like, he's got Pippin, like, riding with him in the movie, which I think just, like, you know, speeds things up a little bit. Pippin is watching in the book and then, you know, sees them when they both come back. But I get it. Like, it cuts out that, even though it's probably a little dangerous to have Pippin with you. Seeing as you, like, rode all this way to keep him out of the hands of the Nazgul.
Let's take him straight to the Nazgul.
Right. Let's just, like, dangle him in front of them. But I do love the way they do that in the movie with, like, the light coming out of his staff, and it's like, it's
that boys' choir is working.
Yeah. Love a boys' choir. I don't know why that tickled me so much, but I mean, that's pretty much. I mean, there were literally so many baby things that I could have picked out, but those are my big things for this section. So next time, we'll be finishing the passing of the Grey Company, which is essentially them getting, because, like, in the chapter, they get through, like, the mountain and out to the other side, but I think we'll see that next time. And we'll finish the Siege of Gondor, which is most likely going to be more epic in the movie than in the book, which we understand, knowing Peter. And we'll also get into Shelob's Lair and the choices of Master Samwise, and hopefully we will welcome back Edis or Hobbit Hot Takes to join us for that one, because that is a great chapter. Shelob's Lair is such a great chapter. Love Tolkien's descriptions of spooky places, and I'll probably just read it to you verbatim because
we need more spook.
Good. Yeah, love the spooky stuff. It's so visceral. Like, I just feel the spooky whenever I'm reading it. You know what I mean? So, Anna, any other thoughts about this part of the movie? You know, we had them climbing up the stairs. We had Elrond to make a brief appearance. We've got Faramir and Pippin finally meeting. You know, Gollum and Sam fighting. Oh yeah, Elrond talking about Arwen dying, which I hate, so I didn't talk about it.
You hate it in the movie?
Yeah. He talks about how, like, Arwen is
giving up so much for him.
Yeah, and he says as Sauron's power grows, her strength wanes. And I'm like, that's literally not how that works, but sure.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, we see them go into the mountain to meet our ghosty boys. We haven't seen the ghost yet. I do love it when, like, Gimli in both is like, you know, a dwarf will go underground and when a dwarf dare not. I think that's cute, and that's accurate to Gimli. And I what's interesting about this chapter is that as soon as that happens, it switches to Gimli's perspective rather than, like, an omniscient narrator or and I think, and Tolkien is good about, like, only a couple of times has it been Aragorn's perspective, but typically speaking, it's always going to be the person, like, least in the know about what the heck is going on. And in this, it's definitely Gimli. He's like, I don't like that we're here, but, you know.
Yeah.
He's going to do it because they're friends. I'm still a little confused why they didn't invite Mary or allow him to go with them. A little confused.
Never thought about that.
Not quite sure why that wasn't an option. Like, they do mention it in the book. Like, Mary's like, hey, I'll come. And they're like, no.
No, thank you.
Yeah. They're like, you have stuff to do with Theoden. And he's like, okay. And then Theoden's like, no, you're not coming with me either. It's so mean.
Yeah.
But luckily, Eowyn sees the value in our Hobbit friend, and he does help out in a good way in the battle. So we're glad that he does find a ride there, and we'll see that a bit later.
Sweet.
Great. So see you next time for Shelob's Lair and the Choices of Master Samwise.